Уважаемые дамы и господа, мы открываем программу первого дня дискуссий «Эффекты Биеннале. Значение для города и международного культурного обмена». Dear participants, we start the program of the first day with the discussion Biennale Effects, Significance for the City and International Cultural Exchange. Please make your applause. Вместе с вашими аплодисментами мы начинаем программу этого дня. Спасибо.
Доброе утро, добро пожаловать в Манеж. Меня зовут Анна Кирикова, я директор по международному сотрудничеству и международной программе Манежа. Как вы знаете, в этом году Манеж уже второй год является площадкой Международного культурного форума. Мы очень рады этому, потому что мы можем продолжать развивать наше международное сотрудничество, приглашать наших гостей. Сегодня у нас замечательная международная интернациональная панель спикеров. Тема, в которой мы сегодня собрались, звучит как «Эффекты Биеннале. Значение для города и международного культурного обмена». И нам удалось пригласить директоров и создателей ведущих и крупнейших мировых биеннале. Сейчас я вам их представлю. Наша дискуссия пройдет в таком достаточно импровизированном ключе. Я предлагаю вам всем задавать вопросы нашим спикерам, потому что действительно уникальная возможность пообщаться с ними напрямую, пообщаться с теми, кто действительно создает эти сложнейшие международные проекты. Сейчас, если позволите, я переключаюсь на английский, так как у нас вся дискуссия пройдет на английском, и представлю наших спикеров. Good morning. I'm now switching to English. So very warm welcome to Manege, very warm welcome to the Cultural Forum, to the VIII Cultural Forum at Manege. We are very happy and honored to have all of you here. Thank you so much for coming. First let me tell you a few words why are we here and why are we talking about biennials today. So you all know that the art world is subject to very rapid change. So everything's changing so quickly. And you also do know that biennials, as a set of established rules and protocols, was formalized back in the 80s. And the 1990s saw what is now called the biennial boom, because this format was widely replicated all through Europe, all through the world. Currently, there are over 300 biennials, at least registered on the Biennial Foundation, which is a lot. And we still keep on counting because there are new and new biennials or triennials appearing all over the world. So today we're speaking with the directors of some of the world's most important biennials to discuss their hands-on and very practical experience of creating and developing biennials. Today we are mostly interested in the new formats that they are creating, how they are reinventing the biennial model, and how their work is actually going to change the future of the biennials worldwide. So after the discussion, there is a Q&A session planned, so please prepare your questions. So I would love to present our speakers. Today we have directors of two biennials that are actually currently ongoing, and two biennials that will occur next year in 2020. Alisa Prudnikova, the commissioner and the creator and the director of the Ural Industrial Biennial. So currently there is the 5th edition happening in Yekaterinburg under a very fascinating theme, immortality. Alisa is also the director of the National Center of regional development of the Russian National Center of Contemporary Arts. Alisa Prudnikova also lectures widely, I guess, but also in the Yekaterinburg State University. And she's also a curator of numerous exhibitions, both in Russia and abroad. Alisa has worked intensively to promote strategies for regional development through contemporary art practices. And she's also the creator of a wonderful initiative that is called Не Москва, which is in English, No Moscow, not Moscow. So this initiative promotes Russian regional contemporary art scene, and this is a multi-year platform that is trying to reveal the cultural potential of the Russian regions and expand communications between international art experts and regional artists and curators. So a very warm welcome to Alisa Prudnikova. So next to Alisa, we have Isabel Bertolotti, who is art director of Lyon Biennale, and Isabel was appointed art director of Lyon Biennale this year. So I expect there has been a major shift, both to the Lyon Biennale and to the Lyon Contemporary, the Museum of Contemporary Arts in Lyon. So Isabel, I guess you will speak also about what has changed with your appointment. Previously, Isabel was head of exhibitions at Lyon Contemporary, Museum of Contemporary Arts, and she has also been organizing a lot of expert events. She's very much into promotion of emerging artists. Isabel, am I right? Yeah, promotion of French and European emerging artists abroad, everywhere. Also, Isabel Bertolotti is an independent curator and an art historian. A very warm welcome to Isabel. So next to Isabel, we have Shika Qassimi, who is the Vice President and Director of External Affairs of the Sharjah Art Foundation. The Sharjah Art Foundation is the institution that is in charge of the Sharjah Art Biennial. Sheikha Nava joined Sharjah Art Foundation in 2010. She has been working in marketing and communications, and now she leads development strategy in what is very important, all of the international collaborations and partnerships. So welcome to Sheikha Nawar Al-Qassimi. And next to me we have Hedwig Fane, director of the one and only Manifesta European Nomadic Biennial. Hedwig studied history and art history at the University of Amsterdam, and she's also the creator and the founding director of the Manifesta Biennial that was launched in Rotterdam back in 1996. And ever since, the Manifesta Biennial has developed into one of the most influential biennials in the world, and you all know the specific format that the biennial has. And over this period, Hedwig has been responsible for the execution of all the aspects of every edition of the biennial. And I think, well, I'm pretty sure that you have been really pushing up towards the biennial to become a more research-based and education-based project. There is also one update on this, because Hedwig has just been awarded with the European Cultural Manager of the Year prize. So congratulations. That happened this week, or last week, sorry. Hedwig is currently working on the 2020 Manifesta edition, which is going to happen in Marseille, and also on the 2022 edition that is going to happen in Pristina, Kosovo. Welcome, Hedwig. Thank you. So, if I might, I would like to start with Isabelle. Can we have her? Yeah, perfect. It's there. So the Lyon Biennial was created in 1991. So this year marks the 15th edition of the Biennial. That is happening under the theme where water comes together with other water. This is from a poem by an American writer, Raymond Carver. And this edition was put together by a team of young curators from the Paris-based Palais Tokyo. So, Isabelle, as I have just mentioned, you have been just recently appointed to be both the director of the Lyon Contemporary and the Lyon Biennial. So there must have been a major shift. And I know that before your appointment, there was only one director who had been in charge of the Biennial. So it's the first change of management for the Biennial. So could you tell us what were your key tasks, challenges, and concerns now, and how, in a way, they differed from the initial impulse that set the Lyon Biennial in action back then? And of course, you can use your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm really happy to be here because the subject is quite interesting. So thank you, Anna, for inviting us, and thank you for the Manege. And it's a real subject. You know, we are together with some of my partners here have this kind of discussion because we are part of an association called IBA, a Biennale association, which talked about these issues, and we are quite interested in that subject. So just to come back to the Lyon Biennale, I would like to say, to sum up the history of the Biennale, it has been created in 1991. It used to have, before that, there was a kind of event every year in Lyon called Octobre des Arts. It's a kind of a art festival every year, and it was very, very well received by the public, and the politicians decided to transform it into a biennale because it was a lot of jobs, and so every year it was too much, and then we decided to have a two-year event. Then in Paris, the Biennale was no longer, so we decided to have it in Lyon. Same what Alisa said, not Paris in that time. So we had this Biennale in a huge place built by Tony Garnier, the architect of the Tour Eiffel, and then it was really successful. Then for 5 years we had this Biennale there. Then we changed for another places because the place became a concert hall. Then we have to find a new places. Then we had a very nice sugar factory along the river. And then we had this last year, we had the opportunity to have a very, very huge place, 220, maybe I can show you. Next. Okay. You just see the rooftop, but it used to be a wool washing machine factory, but abandoned, and we had the opportunity to have this huge place, 29,000 square meters, and then we decided to have this place dedicated for the Biennale. It was, in 1 year, a big challenge because it has been abandoned since 5 years. It was really dirty, really big, and a lot of work to change the electricity, water, everything. We had to do this, and then. Sorry, I'm not very good to. Okay, so as you can see inside this big building, we decided to invite people to produce works. That's the main issues of this Biennale is to produce work in the area. The first man who was curator, it was Jean de Loisy, but at the time he was appointed curator, he was just appointed at the same time in Art School of Paris. So he changed the job, and we worked with a very fantastic curatorial team of a young curator, and they decided to have the landscape as the subject. When I mean landscape, it's not what you imagine with flowers and trees and things like this. It was more landscape you are involved in. So the idea is to have three kind of landscapes. The landscapes, classical landscape, you can say, but also sociological, economical, flux landscape, where you can go through, where you can meet people, and where you can work with other people. And the other one, the third one, is the mental landscape. And all these things were summed up in this name, where waters come together, because in Lyon there are two rivers coming together, and the idea was to adapt the exhibition to the space, a specific space of Lyon. But in fact, the main idea was to work with the economical tissue of economical network in the area, to involve more the people than before. We used to work with companies, of course, but not so many works has been produced in Lyon. This time, more than 95% of the works has been produced in the area. And not for one in a month, but the months before, we invited, 6 months before, we invited all the 56 artists to come to see the huge place, because it's so huge that you cannot imagine it, the volume if you just see your photos or a map or a plan. So we thought it was important to them to come, even if they were in Japan or New Zealand or Korea or everywhere. So we invited them first to come and to have the idea of building a new work. Then after that, we decided to change a bit the concept. For me, a Biennale is not only an event, it's not only an exhibition. It's more. You have to involve all the people in the city, in the area, and all kind of people. Not only, the professional, because during the 30 years we did this, we have a lot of involvement, but not enough. But also the people who are not at all interested in art, which is quite important. We are a big city, not a huge like Paris, but a big city. And all the suburbs are not really involved in. Even if we did a lot of works, there are small art centers, there are different associations and communities, and we wanted to work with them. Then during the 6 previous years, there was a kind of platform called Veduta, and they were involved to find in different cities around people, associations who wanted to receive pieces of our collection of the Museum of Fine Arts to organize small exhibition during the Biennale. And that time we did the same thing, but only partly. We proposed to receive artists in residency and to work with them. And it was really interesting to have them in this area, but I didn't want it to have only exhibition in the periphery. It was not to have a main exhibition and small around. The idea was to have a kind of archipelago, a really event, really involved in the area. So we worked with a lot of communities and a lot of people who were not involved before in. And then the idea was to, for instance, you have this work by Shanna Moulton. This is the entrance of the exhibition, and she built another door like this in the center of the city, because it's also important to have work in the city, not to be closed in your own area. I will not comment all the photos, but just to have, for you to have the impression of the space and the kind of scenography we decided, because we couldn't build walls. It would have been too expensive. The idea was to have a real landscape made by the works. So no walls, only works, and then people can walk through the works and be part of the event. Doesn't work. Sorry.
У нас не работает кликер. У нас работает кликер.
So you will see different kind of works. They all have been built in the factory.
So 95% of site-specifically created works. Isabel, and what about the artist ratio? Because you are now talking a lot about how important was, kind of the regional anchor to this biennial. What is the ratio of local or regional, or national versus international representation?
The first important ratio for me was men and women. So we asked for at least half and half. So it was not a problem for them. That was good. And then after I asked for at least a quarter, 25% of local French. When I mean French, I mean artists living in France, which is important to make the difference, because it's not to have an idea of the local scene. For me, local doesn't mean only Lyon, but in France. But it's important to have also regional artists, because we have a very nice school, a very important school in Lyon, and also different art center, but not a lot of artist-run spaces. We have a Biennale, a museum, an art center, an art school. We have all these important, chain, but artists are living. They're not staying in Lyon. So I'm a bit concerned with this. I would like them to stay, and other foreign artists to come to Lyon. But what's the problem? I wanted to know this, and I wanted to invite them to stay and to have this artist presented in the Biennale. So as you can see just on the photos, we have the opportunity to have so many big pieces. This one is more than 200 tons, so it's a very huge place. And to come back to your question, I think it's really important to be part of the production, to make people stay, to make people involved in the artist, but also all the professional around the Biennale, small art center, artist-run spaces, galleries. The market in Lyon is not very important. All is in Paris. But the idea is to attract also different kind of people. And the museum is involved in the Biennale. As you can see, the facade of the museum. I think for me, it's important to have this situation, because in between, the question is what in between the Biennale. It's very important to have a Biennale in Lyon, because we involved a lot of people, but in between, what do we do with the people we have involved in? The changement I did this time is to program cultural events, research, and think in that direction. And it needs time. So in between the Biennale, we have to work with different university, different schools, but also what I talk about Veduta, it's important to continue the connection between the scene in between the Biennale, to work with the communities, because 1 year is not enough to prepare, so 2 years it's important, but you need to have people working on this. So people from the museum are working on this side also. Sorry. So that's the inside part of the museum, which is quite different. The exhibition is quite different from the factory because it's a museum and the space is quite different. The young curators decided to have more, classical work in the classical part. This is what we did in a library in the periphery, what I was talking about. It's a new one, but they decided to have works in our library. It's a work by Kaderatia and the old work by Mario Merz from our collection of the museum. It was the first time that people see contemporary art in that area, so it was a very nice connection. And women from this community make some poems and dance and different things. They were inspired by this one. It was a very nice moment. And just to finish with this presentation, short presentation, we did also in, how can I say, a kind of a bit poor area, a work with Felipe Arturo, a Colombian artist, about coffee. What's coffee? Coffee is also the plant, of course, but it's also a moment, it's also furniture, it's also a place to be, to meet people. And he organized a walk from this area to the factory, 3 hours walking with the people involved in this area. And it was also a moment to different kind of people to talk about coffee, but also about art. And I think it's important to have this kind of connection between different communities and outside and the center also. I think it's...
So, but this is it something new for the Lyon Biennial? I mean, the activation of this, the inclusion of these peripheral venues or locations.
The inclusion is new because we had this kind of experiences, but not really included. It was a platform around, but not really included. And it's important that it's the same thing. It's not something you do because you want to have this connection, but it's important to be included since the beginning in the project. As for the young creation, since 2002, I'm involved in the young creation, and we did some exhibition during the Biennale, in parallel, but this time we decided to include in the Biennale this part. Include means to involve the curator. It was not the case before, so we talked with the curator. They choose the half part of the artist, and they were involved also in this Veduta program. It's really important to involve them in the local and to them to meet also the local professionals.
So how did it go with the audience? Or, how is it currently going with the audience? Have you achieved actually bringing in completely new audiences?
Yes, because, for instance, for the first week, we decided to invite 6,000 neighbors. The factory is in an old area with not very rich people. They don't know at all about contemporary art, and some of them used to work in the factory in the past. So we decided to help them to come in because they don't know about art, they don't want to know about art, they think they don't have connection with it. So we decided to make a kind of a drink for them, just to, as neighbors could do.
Like welcome.
Yeah, welcome, come here. And some of them said that since 20 years, they knew there was a factory, but they didn't went in. And they just wanted to see what's in. And they discovered contemporary art at that time. So that was a good moment. It was free for them at that moment. And I think it's important to have this kind of event not connected directly with contemporary art, but which connect contemporary art with the people.
And also in terms of the audience, what is the Lyon Biennial current ambition? So basically, who is the audience? It's mostly local people. Are you aiming at being oriented at international crowds?
For the moment, I checked this, and it was 85% local. Mainly the area and around, because we are just near Geneva, Switzerland and Italy, but I wanted to have more and more foreign people, and we are discussing with the economical responsible and also politicians, because I would like to have more people coming for more than one day, which is important also to discover the city, to visit maybe studios, because I'm also in charge of a big residency for artists, 40 studios, and people who are coming to the Biennale are coming for one day for the moment. They're coming in the morning, visiting, and then have a train or back to Paris or flight. I would like them to stay more than one day to discover different things and to be involved in different events also, which is important. So I would like to increase the number of foreign visitors.
Interesting. And coming back to the choice of the curators, you have a group, a collective of rather young curators from Palais Tokyo. So what was the impulse behind selecting them?
To be honest, it was Jean Deloisy, and when he left, I was a bit... The 7 curators, I thought it would be a bit a mess, but it was very nice. In fact, they worked very well together, and it was really interesting to have their different way of seeing things, but working very well together. And they know well the world. They shared the area in the world, and they find some very, very interesting artists with no galleries and not in the market, and some of them were in Europe for the first time, so it was really, really interesting to work with them.
Interesting. And one more very practical question that I'm really interested in is is the funding? So how is the biennial funded? Has something changed with your appointment?
It's a 60% public fund, state, region, metropole and city, and 40% private fund. And this time we found 1 more million, and also we were very helped with the economical companies because of the production. Because we involved them more, they are more interested in having found in the Biennale, because when they help us, they can have, for instance, a party or visit for the client or different kind of thing. We are trying to find them what they want and to propose to them.
And sometimes to the kind of help not with funds but with the production itself,
yeah,
right?
Of course, yes.
That's the best. Yeah. That's the best option.
And some of them only with advices. We had engineer advices. We had very lot of different things. So it was really interesting.
So Isabel, maybe my last question to you. Could you tell us a bit more about the narrative of this edition of the Biennial? So you were talking about the landscapes and the 3 types of landscapes. Is it in a way kind of an experience that is able to immerse? Is it an immersive experience for the audience?
It is, French press, Parisian press, was not so good. So because of the too strange way of showing works, and in a way I was happy with this because we had international press and it was good. So I'm interested in the way, I organized an exhibition years ago in Singapore, and when we arrived we were 20 artists and there were no walls at all. It was a space not big, but and all the artists said, but where are the rooms for my work? And there were no room because it was an entire place without anything. And they said, but I'm a video artist. I have images, sound. He is a video artist. He has images, sound, and we cannot exhibit together with the noise and the light and things like this. And we did this. And it was really interesting because they understood that in the street, when they were outside in the city, they had a lot of sound, light, and things like this, all mixed together. And the audience were used to this, to see works like this and the other one without any walls. And when we organized the Biennale this year, it was in my mind, this experience, and I thought that we have to teach to people to be more open to a way of exhibiting things than not only one room for one artist, then that explained that it's not, how can I say, it's not to illustrate what you think, but more than people can think what he wants to his own experience. I think it's a more question of experience than a question of education, because you talk about education and at the moment.
No, I actually meant the experience. Like, what happens to me if I'm, a visitor to the Biennial? What would be my experience?
Your experience will be to be involved in the work, because some of them are so big. You have to walk, you have to feel, you have to smell, and you have to look at, discover what is this work and the other one just behind. And that's the experience also, because the idea is to create a landscape in which you will be involved in, and that's the main experience.
Are you somehow trying to work with the audience feedbacks? Are you collecting somehow the feedbacks from the audience, since they are supposed to be that involved?
Yeah, and some of them are a bit unstable, but the other one, mainly, not expecting people are more free than we professionals are used to have the label, the works, and
Absolutely.
to be guided to this way. And I think it's nice to be destabilized.
Thank you, Isabel. Does any one of the speakers have a comment or anything? So do we have questions in the audience to Isabel? Any questions or comments? Сейчас к вам с микрофоном подойдут.
Здравствуйте, Изабель. Спасибо большое за столь интересный рассказ. У меня один небольшой вопрос. Скажите, платные ли для посетителей мероприятия Биеннале, особенно для тех, кого вы хотите пригласить на выставку, которые, вот, например, на этом заводе? То есть людей нужно туда заманивать. Берете ли вы за них деньги за вход на это мероприятие?
Yeah, the entrance is not free, but it's free for a lot of people. I can say that to be very rich people have to pay, and people who are not employed, who are less than 80, who are students, don't have to pay. So it depends on the people.
Спасибо. Спасибо.
Есть ли еще вопросы, комментарии? Any questions, comments? Спасибо.
Добрый день, уважаемые спикеры. Очень приятно слышать вас. Добрый день, Изабель. Вот у меня такой вопрос. В принципе, у меня было несколько вопросов, на которые вы уже в ходе ответили. Что делает площадка между биенналями? Вы сказали, что вы там делаете кураторские проекты, какие-то образовательные, да, я так понимаю. И как, вот вы говорите, что вы еще привлекаете жителей, да? Привлечение — это только то, чтобы они зашли в это пространство, или еще какие-то вы используете? Вот у меня какие-то форумы. И второй вопрос у меня, вот ставится ли перед биеннале задача каким-то образом заработать какую-то часть там, финансов, скажем так, насколько она коммерческая, ставится ли задача перед биеннале заработать денег?
We are a non-profit association. In fact, we are an association, but we have to have a budget. So we need part money from private fund. But if we don't have it, we will not produce so much. But it's not a problem of earning money, just to have a balance. Your first question concerning how to attract people is, for me, it's not a question of attractivity, it's a question of make them informed about the Biennale, because the main issues is that people don't know, they don't know about. If you are involved in a network of professionals like we are, we know about Biennale everywhere in the world. But if you just live near not in the center, you even don't know about it. So the idea is during the 2 years we are preparing the Biennale, we are working with politicians, with school, with sometimes jails, prisons, some hospitals. We're working in these different kind of association, group of people, and we are working with them. And the idea is to make them involved in the project. And we also organize a lot of performances during the Biennale, and some of them in between. For instance, for one of the artists, a Cuban artist, she didn't have any money enough money to do the work, and she needed assistance. And she asked for a community of women with difficulty, and the woman decided to help her to build the work together. And this woman, it was really, for me, it was I discovered this. This woman said that this was the first time they do work. I mean, they had a pencil or something to do kind of art, but they never did this in their life. So this was an interesting experience for me, and that's also a way to be involved in the real life, which is important.
Спасибо. Thank you, Isabel. Just a reminder. Oh, sorry, we have one more question.
Good morning, Isabel.
Good morning.
I have just one question. Maybe you can say nearly 5 names of artists which I need to know who was installed in your Biennale, which I can Google now, because I'm interested in art, sorry. Just 5 names, if it's possible.
So, for instance, you have Thomas Feuerstein, or Panapan Yodmani, or Josefa Enjam. They are not well known. So the idea of the Biennale is to make them discovered by the world of art and other
Okay,
people.
so if I go to some website or somewhere, I can check.
On the website of the Biennale, you can find all of them.
Okay, thank you.
And also just a reminder, the Lyon Biennial is actually currently still on view. It is open in Lyon until the 5th of January. So you can still go to France. Thank you so much, Isabel. So I would like us to switch to another speaker, Alisa Prudnikova, the commissioner and the artistic director of the Ural Industrial Biennial of Contemporary Art. So we had some industrial flavor with the Lyon Biennial this time. Now we are going to talk about the industrial biennial, which has this industrial specifics. So the Ural Biennial was created in 2010. This is the youngest biennial among the biennials we currently have here. This year's edition is under very intriguing theme, immortality. So Alisa, if you could tell us more about the selection of the theme and the biennial itself.
Thank you very much. So actually I was presenting already so many times Biennial in St. Petersburg, so I wanted to reflect more on questions which we were kind of asked at the panel about effects of Biennial, because we are all questioning ourselves about why Biennial, what would be result, what we expected, what we didn't expect, but it's happening. So I can analyze the experience of the Ural Industrial Biennial since the very beginning, since 2010, and talk and discuss together with you actually the effects of Biennial, how we imagine it, and what we couldn't really imagine. And I want just to make this short overview about how we decide to do Biennial in 2010. So our initial idea was to work with Yekaterinburg and its interesting contemporary art community and to put it in a global context. We are a National Center for Contemporary Art. We are a government-based institution and we have a network in 8 branches in Russia, and Yekaterinburg, one of the, let's say, oldest branch. We were established in 1998, and I came with my team in 2005, and we were really felt this lack of kind of big project behind our back. In 2005 it was established the Moscow Biennial of Contemporary Art, and of course we were all felt this like revolution which Moscow Biennial brought. So this understanding we are part of this global world and how fascinating this world, how it was really enormous feeling when Moscow Biennial appeared, and we were thinking about kind of same feeling for Yekaterinburg and kind of dream to be somewhere in the world. And when I asked, okay, where are you from? And I'm from Yekaterinburg. Oh, okay, so it's where the Ural Industrial Biennial. And until 2010 we didn't have this project which would really be devoted to this territory and at the same time would be really global. And at this time to become biennial was a really kind of reasonable story, and already in 2010 there were more than 250 biennials all over the world, and that's why we decided to be more precise, and that's why we are the Ural Industrial Biennial of Contemporary Art, not just Ural Biennial, not just Yekaterinburg Biennial of Contemporary Art, but we are the Industrial Biennial. And it's became for our destiny and development of our biennial, it became a really crucial story, and I'm really happy that we created such a fantastic topic for so many years, and we understood that this is really what it's so interesting to study, because Yekaterinburg, and I will show you several pictures and kind of our time machine of our biennial. So we, of course, the whole territory is rooted in this industrial identity, because Yekaterinburg as a city, it was established in 2000. Oh my God! It was established 1723. 20 years after St. Petersburg, and of course it was established as a factory city. And when the whole world started to talk about this post-industrial society and all these effects, so we still deeply rooted in this industrial economics. And the region is quite wealthy, I can say, but we still produce. We don't have this Ruhr story, or even not a Lyon, where we're talking about this industrial ruins. So we have all these industrial monsters which are still alive and they are still produced. And for us it was really like an interesting ambition talk about this, the same root of industrial and of art. And you know, this idea of artistic production and industrial production as the same processes going into different directions. So as a result, on the one hand, you have a tank, and as a result, on the other hand, you have a piece of contemporary art. And with our editions of Biennial, just once again, so first we came to the factories, we start to deal with art at these factories. At the second Biennial, we already understood that it would be too boring just at the same time all the time to explore this idea, or art came to the factories, so it's not sexy anymore, and we want to go deeper into this fabric of the city, and we start to do a lot of street interventions, urban interventions, and talk about this idea of city factory and artistic practice. We were talking a lot about labor, and we start also to talk about the region, not only one city, but also how we are talking about Ural, and let's say Uralness. What does it mean, this unique of the territory and this global context? And the third biennial, we were totally disappointed in this Uralness, and we didn't want to talk about this local identity anymore, but we were so lucky to be placed in fantastic monument of constructivist architecture. VIII Hotel, it's part of, living complex of apartments, which is called Chekist's house, and it's KGB officers' ex-dormitory. And working in this constructivist monument and talking about the idea of constructivism architecture, which is considered by our officials as a not really valuable something. And when we came first to one of our quite influential persons at the administration of the city, he told us, constructivism is an architecture for poor people, and poorness cannot be the brand of the city. And it was in 2007, I guess. And when in 2015 we did this biennial, this fantastic architectural site. So this was really new stage for understanding of this industrial heritage and this understanding of the value of constructivism architecture, of this enormous potential as a cultural heritage and resource and such an inspiration. And of course it's a nice slide, I like it very much. So we got a lot of recognition all over the world, and we got many awards, and we really feel that biennial format gives us a lot of freedom in working with its format. So we developed, for example, such a structure for us, which we keep for the moment. So we have main project, and every time we invite we do a close competition, we invite external curator, we can invite not international curator, but we have many Russians at the competition at the moment. We have artist in residence program, which is again kind of the soul of the biennial, and we did many experimental formats when we invite artists to the function in factories all over Ural, now also in Siberia, South Orenburg Oblast, so it's another one. And we trying to work with with the real productions, which would be curious enough to organize this and invite this artistic experiment to their infrastructure. So telling the truth, factories, they don't need artists. They don't want this contemporary art came to their context. So it's interesting for us. But, with the time being also, we already found out that those directors of factories, they became our kind of co-thinkers, and they want to they start understand also the meaning why we're such in a hunger for their enterprises, for their production sites, and for their people, for their specific of their community, for specifics of their production. So that's really interesting. And of course, we all the time doing like special projects as every biennial, but what is also important for us, it's intellectual platform. That's our answer, what we are doing in this not biennial year. We do a lot of research, we do a lot of discussions, we do a lot of educational programs, and it's like our mission to biennial kind of dispersed in the city, and that we propose theme of the biennial at the beginning of the year, so it will happen next January, latest February, and since that moment we have this 2-year period for all this interdisciplinary intellectual discussions, because when you're doing industrial biennial, so you can't just stay in this, you know, walls of the Center for Contemporary Art. So we are really doing interdisciplinary, and we are doing a lot of things to study the topic in many aspects. I just wanted to point your attention for this nice venue. It was for the previous biennial, for the 4th one, and it's a phrase, it's a object by a very famous artist from Ekaterinburg, Timofey Radia, and he made this phrase, who are we, where are we from, where are we going? And you know, the tricky situation is that we had a big conflict this year in Ekaterinburg about city activists and official demand to build a cathedral in Ekaterinburg in one of the parks. And actually, you know, the fantastic situation for the biennial, because after artists asked this question, finally, after this conflict, when actually citizens won and they and cathedral wouldn't be built at the square, at the park, but officials now decide that it will be built at that place. So the factory will be destroyed, and actually the answer will be... It will be. The cathedral will be built at the plant, not at the park, but instead of at the space of the first industrial biennial, which is, I mean, very symbolic. And of course, some answers for the questions about, because effects, it's also, they grow from the values, and values of the biennial are like really connected with what I said before, with this industrial philosophy. So of course we are dealing with industrial as a heritage and actual practice. We rethinking the significance of architecture of industrial period, but now we're also talking about Soviet modernism, because the 5th biennial, it's organized at the factory which was built in late 70s, 80s, and it's another story. Of course, we are part of this, we start from the very beginning thinking about the strategic development of the city, because we worked really close with the administration of the city, and you know, they are thinking about like city development also through strategic plan. I cannot say that it was since the very beginning such a beautiful collaboration, but we were insisted on involving us into this strategic plan and consider biennial as part of this strategic region development. And now, maybe in 10 years only, I can say that yes, we are part of this city strategy. It's, you know, with the time being, of course, things changed, and now we, let's say, more established from the point of view of our local government as well. Being industrial biennial, for us it also was since the very beginning of the strategy of fundraising, because you can never do a sustainable project with like a clear understanding of resources, and we knew since since the very beginning that rely only on government money, it's impossible in our situation, and of course we need to find partners, and our partners, it's industrial enterprises and business who believe in the same things as we are. And when we are talking about effects, we always try to draw this picture and think, okay, what biennial would mean and change for Ekaterinburg, for the region, for Russia, and for the world? How we would like to, to reshape all these levels, and how we want to be involved in this process. And it's really nice training when we start every next biennial. We really challenge ourselves, our team, how to deal on those different levels, because every biennial doing something different in terms of involvement on these things. What else? Yeah, it's actually, I mentioned most of this, and just nice pictures. It's that VIII hotel which I mentioned, which was really revived in 2015, and after 2015, unfortunately, it's not such a also happy end story that this monument got a new life, but still it's now conservated as a monument. But of course, there is still no investor to make, for example, new concept of art hotel, which I would really love to bring as a also like biennial effect. But it's, I think it will happen. Maybe it's just it's time taking, but I would really not dream but wish that this hotel would be turned into this really nice and beautiful concept. Okay, and just very briefly about these important things that, there also these success scenarios of the Ural Biennial also advocates the idea of decentralization. It's our key point, and we, since the very beginning, we were talking about that we really care about this international and global context, and we believe that this certain point in the world could be visible within the biennial format and idea. Now we can talk about cultural tourism as well, because we are doing really interesting industrial routes around the region, and we can do both industrial heritage specific of territory and new artistic practices, contemporary artists. And also I can talk that one of the main effects of the biennial is people who is working this professional sphere in Ekaterinburg, and now we have new generation of brilliant curators. Like we already had artists and fantastic artists, but now they are, of course, they are more connected, let's say, to the world, because they're known for so many curators. They invited to many countries, and being this being curator in Ekaterinburg now means being in this very intensive cultural sphere, and that's not only biennial effect, but biennial means a lot for this. And maybe the last story about immortality and our 5th edition. So the 4th biennial was discussed the story of the 4th industrial revolution, and we were talking about these 100 years of October Revolution in a very critical way, talking about this possible effect of force, global technological revolution. And we were thinking, okay, what next? And immortality we consider as this lack of time, value of time, all these ideas of this, what is the end of technological progress, and what could we consider as this technological progress. And also one of the key points which our curator of main project, Xiao Yuwen, pointed that, okay, if we could, let's say, conquer death, what would we do with immortality if we get it? It's our answer for, not answer, but maybe our tiny trace in this big discussion of what is the biggest challenge for the world right now. And I really consider immortality as a, this last challenge which we can feel on these fingers, but still didn't get it. Let's think about what would happen if we get it. It's our great Xiao Yuwen, and it's our location, which is very problematic. It's problematic and fascinating at the same time. It's a functioning factory, and doing a biennial about immortality at the functioning military factory, because they produce many let's say, I don't know, traffic lights. They produce a lot of things for optics, for lasers, for medicine use, but also they produce this part for the weapon, and export extensively. And it was a big discussion with our curator. It was a big discussion since the very beginning, how we can implement this critical attitude, this critical artistic attitude to this context of Ekaterinburg. Because when you invite Chinese curator with American passport to Russian factory with this, let's say, double production and talking about immortality, I can consider it as a century momentum and fantastic opportunity to discuss these things at this moment. Maybe I will, and this is, of course, we can't talk about immortality without Anton Vidokl and Arseny Zhelaev, and it's in Coliseum. It was homage to their incredible work and study Cosmism, Russian Cosmism, and it's a timeline of their research which can be considered as a big postscriptum to, or epigraph, both ways how to see biennial, and for this discussion about immortality. I think this is the last one. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Alisa. I would just like to say that the Yekaterinburg Biennial is very recognizable for the mediation work that you are doing. So, I'm always very interested, because there is this curator's reflection that he or she is presenting in the main project, or in his or her project in the biennial, but how this reflection is getting transmitted to the audiences. Could you just tell us a few words about how your mediators work? And I know that this is something that you take really seriously.
We learned with our own mistakes a lot. And at the first biennial, when we invite Ekaterina Diogat, Cosmin Kostinas, and David Rief, so I can say that it was incredible. It was fantastic curatorial approach and the project, which we didn't mediate a lot to the audience, and that our audience wasn't ready to think about contemporary art at the same conceptual level. And we haven't think a lot about any mediation which is needed for such a conceptual artistic projects. And since the first biennial, we developed a program. It's actually mediator school, and our mediators learned a lot from Manifesta. We sent our specialists to consult in many biennials, and we again learned this global practice, how to work with mediation of biennial, and also we put it to the local context, and we developed our own mediators program. And since we started it at the second biennial, but at the third, it's already became a real school. Now we have fantastic community of our mediators all over Russia who were study at this program, and it's we recommend to every visitor walk around Biennial with this mediator too. And but it's not only. I guess it's the most important story which we initiated as a Biennial as an institution, but also we do so many things for education, and our practice of Biennial is really closely connected with institution, because at National Center of Contemporary Art, it's a base of our team, and we can work on everyday practice. And of course, with this everyday practice and everyday approaches to build this audience, to educate our audience within already 15 years, since 2005, of course, it's a lot of changes.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments?
Скажите, пожалуйста, а это оптический прицел на логотипе Биеннале в этом году или нет?
Что, извините?
На логотипе Биеннале оптический прицел или нет?
Нет, это не такая прямая история, но, наверное, это все совпало. Нет, это было рассуждение о бессмертии, и это был огромный челлендж для нашего арт-директора Ирины Коротич, вообще как изобразить бессмертие. Это точка, из которой потом все вырастает. Ну, или заканчивается, whatever.
Спасибо.
У нас вопрос?
Здравствуйте, спасибо всем за то, что вы приехали. Вопрос такой. В некотором роде Биеннале — это финализирующее мероприятие, в некотором роде ультра-контемпорари событие, которое демонстрирует все самое-самое трендовое, последнее и важное. Вопрос, насколько действительно имеет значение локальный контекст, потому что в последнее время создается впечатление, что локация больше не имеет значения, и современное искусство в некотором роде все больше глобализируется. Это так или это иллюзия? И есть ли необходимость играть с какими-то национальными клише и кодами, например, заигрывать с этой историей чего-то суперрусского для того, чтобы привлекать к нам внимание? Или в этом нет необходимости?
Ну, на нашей Биеннале мы не заигрываем с суперрусскостью, мы искренне и очень планомерно исследуем локальную специфику и очень много времени и усилий посвящаем ей. То есть вот я могу сказать, что очень много дискуссий в последнее время идет про вот это понятие глокальности, как совмещать глобальное и локальное. Мне кажется, что как раз индустриальная биеннале — это такой идеальный пример того, что называется глокал, потому что действительно мы максимально местную специфику погружаем вот в какое-то глобальное обсуждение. И мне кажется, это единственный путь для того, чтобы говорить о каких-то региональных практиках на сегодняшний момент, потому что именно, иначе это будет либо супер экзотично, либо супер провинциально, и только когда ты отбиваешь вот эту вот какую-то специфику, разные контексты, разные другие идентичности и смотришь на самые неожиданные параллели, тогда это возникает как некое глобальное явление.
Спасибо.
Maybe I can answer this also, because I think the biennial started originally specifically in trying to develop relationship between outside and inside. So even if you organize a biennial in Russia, in St. Petersburg or in Moscow, it is about, let's say, the collaborations, the trying to find coexistence in different parties. It's opening up through a world. Or, as in some biennials, looking through the outside world, if it is Europe, Asia, Middle East, through a specific city, and this makes this site specificness also so relevant and urgent. And I think many of the biennales, but I don't like the word biennales anymore because it is like such a generic word. It's almost devaluating the format. But I think what museums in the 21st century or cultural institutions or biennials could do is serve as a platform for what is happening in the world, bringing in discussions or connections between the world outside and the people, the communities, and create relationships. And I think this could also be a new position. As the ICOM, the World ICOM conference in Kyoto in September said, maybe there is a new position for museums and biennials in the world to bring in the discussions from outside inside, and maybe this could be also a topic of our discussion later.
Thank you. So the Ural Biennial is also still in view until the early December. Yeah?
Until 1st of December, so please come.
Yeah, so you have 2 more weeks. Thank you, Alisa. So Sheikh Nava, you are launching an amazing biennial next year. It has just been announced.
2021.
2021, exactly. 2021, or yeah. Thinking historically in the present, and it says in the announcement that this biennial is going to reflect on the past editions that you've made and also consider the reimagining, maybe the re-evaluation of the biennial format. This is also very matching to our conversation today. So could you tell us about the Sharjah Biennial, how it came into existence back then in 1990s, and how it has shifted, how the focus has shifted, and what it is now?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's really great to be here.
Можно нам, пожалуйста, презентацию Биеннале в Шарджа?
Yes, thank you. So the Sharjah Biennial, well, to give a bit of context, Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates is not the capital, it's not the main city. However, it is the cultural emirate. There's over 16 museums. It's focused on arts and culture. It's the hub for art, culture, and education. The biennial officially began in the 1990s. However, the art scene in Sharjah started in the late 70s. And something really important to consider is the UAE is a young country. It was founded in the 70s. So at a time when there was not much going on in the UAE, when it was still being developed, there was a very small, very quiet underground art scene in Sharjah. And it wasn't artists from Sharjah, it was artists from the entire United Arab Emirates who were convening and working together and producing things on a very quiet, low scale. The first Biennale began in the 90s, 1993 officially, in the Expo Center, which you see here, which was a tent that had different events, book fairs, trade shows, and art. The Biennale in the 90s followed a format kind of like Venice, so it was country representation. It was artists from different places. In the beginning, it was very local and very regional. And then in 2003, our format changed a little, and Qassimi, who was our president and director, took over the biennial. It was initially government run. It was not curatorial. There was not really concepts or themes placed. It wasn't very thematic. She took over and changed the format and completely changed the way the biennial looked in Sharjah. International artists were invited, regional artists were invited, there were commissions. We began collecting really from the early 2000s, but it took place in an exhibition center. There was not a lot of place to show contemporary art, and it didn't really work so well because you would have people coming in to go to a jewelry show and then walk in to see your exhibition, or it didn't really fit, and then also the kinds of works that were being produced. So it was basically this big hall, which was great initially because you had the space to create large-scale projects. Artists had the freedom to build large things, but again, there was something missing in the long term. However, artists were working and experimenting on their own, outside of the biennial, outside of institutions, and there were not many. This is an exhibition, this is a public performance, this is the first public performance that took place that was documented in Sharjah in 1985. It was the late Hassan Sharif, a Emirati artist, who did a public performance in front of the souk. And this is something that we had an exhibition of his work a couple of years ago, and people who were there on that day at that time stumbled upon our exhibition and said, "Oh my God, I remember this. We had no idea what was happening. We did not know who this person was. We didn't even realize it was a performance." But these things were happening in the city kind of on their own, underground, quietly. There wasn't a decision from the emirate or the city or the nation to say, you know what, we need a biennial. It happened very organically. And there were annual exhibitions that were taking place. And then in 1993, the government realized that there were artists on their own going on and doing annual exhibitions, asking for funding, putting on exhibitions, bringing people together, and said, you know what, we as a government want to fund this. We'll give you a grant, we'll give you a space, we will give you a platform. And the biennial happened. And that's also something that for us, I mean, we're very lucky because we do have a government that is supportive of art and culture. We do have a government that funds us. We are government funded. We still have to raise private funds to continue to do the work that we're doing, but we have a lot of support, whether it's financial, production-wise, promotion-wise, just that kind of relationship with the government also is very important to us. Moving now to more recent times, as I mentioned earlier, the format didn't work for the nation to have a biennial that was in kind of an expo trade center. We began using different places in the Emirate to show art, and we were still just a biennial. So every 2 years we would put an exhibition on, and then it would be quiet, and then another 2 years, and every time there was a biennial, it attracted people from around the world. So Sharjah was completely transformed for a few months, and then it was quiet again. So in 2009, there was a decision to create an institution. So we became Sharjah Art Foundation. However, our work had been going on very early. But we felt as an organization and as people working on the biennial that the city needed something more long-term, something more long-lasting. And as a biennial, we were commissioning works, we were producing works, we had site-specific works, we collected. But biennials can't really have connections, can they? You need something more long-term. We were giving grants, but then if you're giving grants, that has to be something that's more long-term. So the foundation was formed, and the center of our work, I mean, the biennial is still an important part of our work, but we also supported artists in many different ways. We are now one of the very few institutions in our region that fund art, which is a shame, but there is a lack of funding for arts in a lot of places. We give grants and residencies and we do production. So everything that is in the biennial is everything that you'll see in biennials, we know as an institution that we will work with those artists 5 years down the road. We will create these networks, we'll create these relationships. We will work with curators, museum directors. Our work is no longer about bringing the outside, artists from the outside to Sharjah, but connecting Sharjah as an emirate, as a city, to the rest of the world. From those years onwards, we started using borrowed space, so we would do projects in public spaces. In very early years, projects would be removed by people because they didn't know it was artwork. People wouldn't understand what it was, but over the years, the continuity of placing things in the public, making the public question what you're doing, interact with the work, really changed the relationship. Because of the nature of where we work, we had to work in heritage houses, which are beautiful old houses with courtyards made of coral stones, but that means that you can't put anything on the walls. We had to borrow the museum, but because it was a museum, we had to be sensitive of what we could put inside. And then in 2013, we acquired these art spaces. We built 5 contemporary galleries that are very beautiful architecturally, but also blend in with the heritage area. And it wasn't, it was deliberate for us in the sense that we needed an exhibition space and the Biennial needed a place to grow and a central kind of point. But what happened was that this also transformed the landscape of the city. We created an art destination or an art neighborhood or an arts area without even thinking about it. After we started programming in these spaces, we had other people come and do cultural things in the neighborhood. We had studios open. Visitors would come and stay in the area. There are now hotels and cafes and restaurants and shops in this entire neighborhood. So it's very interesting to see how we've also impacted the infrastructure and the economy in this neighborhood. And the neighborhood that we operate in is one of the oldest neighborhoods in Sharjah, and it's a part of town where people have been leaving, businesses have been closing. And when people have moved out, we moved in and then kind of changed the dynamic of this entire area. We also have studio spaces, so we have locations that are on different peripheries of the Emirate. We have things that are in the central part of town, and then we have spaces that are like this. These studios are on the beach in a small fisherman village, so it's a tiny part of Sharjah where nothing happens, but the fact that we've placed this exhibition center there and we put our biennial there and we do things there completely changed that destination. So we're also creating footfall and traffic and changing the landscape of the Emirate just through the work that we're doing as a biennial.
So you have completely reactivated the Sharjah in the entire region?
Yeah, in a way that maybe we weren't even thinking about as an art institution or as a biennial. We don't really think of, we want to bring tourism or footfall, or it's not really what we're thinking of. We're thinking of, the artists and supporting them and creating these projects. But having these projects in these places also puts importance and relevance on these places to everybody else in the neighborhood. They're not downtown, they're not the main locations of the city. Something that's really interesting also to mention is that we, like I was saying earlier, we use heritage houses. So this is one of the oldest heritage houses in Sharjah that we use. And it's from the 1700s, and it has 16 rooms, residency spaces. And by using these heritage houses, we've changed the way people look at these houses, and instead of looking at them as kind of old and abandoned, they're now becoming places of importance. The entire area is now becoming a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And it's not just the efforts of us, but also the efforts of other institutions that work in that region, in that area. Oftentimes, an interesting way to look at also how a biennale can affect the city. A lot of times artists want to create large-scale projects, they want to experiment, they want to push boundaries. And we as biennials or as institutions often look for spaces that are important but maybe not used so much, not activated, discarded. So we go into old buildings that were maybe important in the 70s or not important anymore, or some landmarks, and we do projects. And because of the biennial, because of the wonderful projects that we've been able to do in these places, we've been able to convince property developers, people in the government, to leave these buildings alone, to not tear them down, to not build, a new bridge or a tower, but to keep it as a space for contemporary art. So it's really amazing the soft power that you have, and how you can influence really an infrastructure of a city by placing art in these places. Really so much to the point that because we've been doing this for a long time, some of our colleagues in the town planning department will literally call us up and say, there's a building, it's from the 60s, it's abandoned, they want to tear it down, do you want to use it? If you use it, we can save it. And we started thinking this way together. We started challenging really the infrastructure of the city together by placing art in buildings that were very important to a certain generation, but then are on the brink of being torn down because somebody wants to build a hotel or somebody wants to do a highway.
So this is also, it's like an urbanism trigger, actually, because what you do on a cultural project, a biennial cultural project, becomes a trigger of urbanism for the town or region.
And it's also about repurposing these spaces as well. these venues are in the old part of town. They're now where some of our main venues are, and these are kind of squares that were, inhabited, empty, and over the years we've been placing by inviting artists to create new commissions and site-specific works. These areas become reactivated, and if you come to this neighborhood now today, there's always children playing there, there's always somebody there, there's always somebody happening. So it's also repurposing the fabric and changing the perception of, this is the old part of town, nothing happens there, to this is a community area, this is the old neighborhood, this is where people come to look at art, and if there's no, if we don't have something there, this is where people will come to spend time.
So you do a lot of community work, and kind of engage the community into...
The community is really at the core of all of our projects and what we're doing.
And as far as I know, the United Arab Emirates are very international in terms of population. So what is your ambition? What is your ambition here? I mean, curators, artists, what is the ratio between local and international?
It's a good question. We try to keep, for biennales, we invite curators to apply, basically. There's a selection. So we will invite a number of curators to visit a current biennale and then propose something for the next edition. But when there is a selection, we select internally. It always has to be relevant to the Emirate of Sharjah and to something that is relevant to us in the region. So we're not thinking of what's an international topic. Yes, it has to be an international topic, but most importantly, it has to be relevant to us as Sharjah, as the region, as the UAE. And the ratio of artists differs. It's always a curatorial decision. So as a biennial or as an institution, we try not to interfere with who's being invited, because then, we would just be kind of choosing the same people over again. But we do push and encourage that local artists are considered. Local meaning people who work in the UAE. It's actually I think it's sometimes problematic to think of regions and think of local versus international, because, who's even local anymore? We're all, we all belong to so many places. We all identify as so many different things. But, we do encourage artists and curators and artists to come and do research and discover different things.
So, and with your upcoming edition, why do you feel that now there is really the need to reevaluate the format itself?
So for the upcoming edition, it was conceived by the late Okwi Amazor. He was working on it for a while with our director before he passed away, and really this was his vision. He wanted to look at Sharjah as a format of a different biennial and wanted to change the question of, what are these biennials? It's something that I think it's something that's very important and very ambitious. And I personally think also it's about time, and I think this is something that we were all discussing earlier. It's about time to reevaluate what is the biennial, and is this the right model anymore? And do we even need a biennial, or do we even need a typical biennial model? Us as an institution, absolutely not. We made a decision to move away from being just a biennial a long time ago, and I think it's done wonders. When you are a biennial, of course, you push boundaries and you give space for experimentation, but when you're not performing, when you're not exhibiting, when you're not doing anything, there is a gap in the community, and sometimes the community needs more than just the biennial. I mean, my colleagues were saying earlier on, the biennial does not attract everybody. It'll attract a certain number of people, but there are people who don't know about art, don't care about art, and might not be impacted by it. But when you have things going on in the long term, these are the projects that will draw people in that are outside of this formal biennial. And this is where we come in when we do music programs and performance programs, and we work across different languages, and we do things in public spaces. And with the biennial, you are sometimes restricted because it's thematic, it's conceptual. There's a curator, there's a budget, there's a boundary, there's timelines. But when you work year round, it brings a very different perspective to the community. And then, of course, as you can see, like the scale of the project is very, it differs. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to create kind of these large-scale works in the spaces that we were using. So we give artists really the freedom to create experimental projects, and then as a foundation we collect. So we collect out of every biennial that we produce. We collect a lot of the commissioned works. We're opening a collection building in about 2 years. Well, it depends on the production, but we're opening a collections building, and we hope to show all of the works that we've been collecting since very early biennials, which a lot haven't been seen before. This is also going back to how biennials transform cities. This is a procession that we did in one of our past biennials with a group, and this was on a Friday after prayers, and we were like, are people going to come out on the streets on a Friday? Fridays in the UAE are like, there's nobody anywhere, it's completely quiet. We started a procession, and I think about 1,000 people walked across Sharjah following Papi Abatani. And you can see from the images, I mean, it's not your international art world. Really, it's a completely 100% local audience. And at the end of that procession, we all gathered in a square, and they started looking around at everybody and saying, what is this? What's happening? What else can I see? I promise you, I guarantee you that this group of people would not have walked into a gallery. They would have walked right past it and not walked in. But the moment that artists are working in different communities and working with different formats, if there was an installation on the side of the road, people would look at it. But since it was a procession, there was music, there was singing, there was dancing, it broke all boundaries. People completely connected on a level they understood. And then we had to explain what a biennial was to people who didn't even, you would never even think would come into a biennial.
So the 15th edition is coming 2021.
Yes. So next March we have an annual conference called the March meeting. So next March we are kind of starting the discussion for the Biennale, and then in March 2021 we will open the exhibition. And there's a working group that is presenting the concept that Okwi had conceived, and they're basically going to be working on developing it. So, you were saying about working with like 7 curators. We're going to be working with a big group of people to make this biennial happen.
Thank you. So I think we will be really looking forward to the biennial in 2021 and see how it can help us all reevaluate the format and search for the new formats. So Hedwig, up to you. So the Manifesta in Marseille is occurring next year. Можно нам, пожалуйста, презентацию?
Thank you, Anna. And thank you so much for the Manege of inviting me and the Cultural Forum. I'm very thankful for this because I share so many wonderful memories about the year 2014 when Manifesta 10 took place in St. Petersburg. Although it was the annus horribilis of 2022, it was still a very memorable event with a lot of legacy, but maybe we can come up to this. Maybe not everybody knows where Manifesta is the only itinerary biennial. We move from place to place. The origin is 30 years ago, actually Saturday, 30 years ago, the fall of the Berlin Wall, when half of Europe came together and there were 8 countries asking the Netherlands, could you imagine a biennial which is reinventing what Europe is supposed to be? And that was 1989, now 30 years ago. And indeed, after 25 years, because Manifesta started in 1993, and in 1996 the first edition was, after 25 years, we now arrived in Marseille. The idea of the reinventing the biennial is because of our nomadic character. we are not just following a model of a series of exhibitions, but we're trying to find out what is the DNA of Europe at this certain specific momentum through political, social engagement, but also through looking at the world through the eyes of a specific city. And you see that now Palermo 2018, which was last year, Marseille, we are in the south hemisphere of Europe, and we're going to the Balkan for the first time in 2022, and we're also selecting Manifesta 15 already next year. This also sounds maybe that we work on a Biennale 4 to 6 years in advance. Why? Because we want to work bottom up. This means we are reacting upon a certain questions from artists, architects, but also politicians in cities, and we try to manage Manifesta as an incubator. So Manifesta is reacting upon a series of questions which are sometimes posed by the political scenario from different cities. I want to tell you something about Manifesta 12, which took place in kind of iconic city of Palermo, and the title was The Planetary Garden, How Do We Cultivate Coexistence? As you could imagine, let me check out if he still works. I was invited by the mayor of, the legendary mayor of Palermo, Leoluco Orlando, who was 25 years working on fighting the mafia, with a quite extraordinary question. He said, Hedwig, can you imagine that something like Manifesta can help me transforming the city of mafia and the city of culture? And I said, come on, we're not the European Union, we're not the United Nations, we're an artistic event, but let me think about it. And this got into the question that we were definitely and super interested, and I got in touch with Rem Koolhaas of OMA, a quite famous architecture studio in the Netherlands, and we both looked at the question, what can a biennial do? And maybe let's skip the wording biennial. What can an event, an incubator as Manifesta do in transforming cities in general? And this is where I come to my second point. I think Manifesta reinvented itself as much more interdisciplinary. So we're not only artistically focused, we're mostly focused at the moment on architectural, urbanistic, planning, transformation processes, acting as an incubator, but specifically also as co-creation and co-producing. Third, most important for me, bottom-up practices. This means that before we even decide upon a creative mediator, not a curator, but a creative mediator, before we decide upon a thematic approach, before we decide what Manifesta should do, we ask in a series of workshops, local communities, what do you want from Manifesta? What is the relevance? What is the urgency here? Otherwise, we in principle don't come. So the question in Manifesta 12 in Palermo is, can Manifesta be an instrument for local people to claim back their own city, which was obviously occupied by, let's say, the criminal force for 70 years. You see it here, why Palermo, we wanted to, with help of everybody, and of course, with Mayor Leoluco Orlando, but also other organizations, transforming the city of mafia into the city of culture. And of course, there was the European Italian culture capital. There were other events participating. Sometimes Manifesta works as an incubator. Let's say the first move to activate, to empower people, because the idea is not that we are, of course, transforming a city, but we create, let's say, the parameters. Why Palermo was so important? Because 3,000 years, as a palimpsest, Palermo acts with all these different social communities, from the Greek, the Romans, the Phoenicians, the Germans, the Hohenzollerns, the French. All these cultures have been multi-layered upon themselves, and it is a city which wanted a new start after, let's say, 150 years of violence and economic difficulties. One of the most important issues which we also came together is that Europe itself, the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, of course, is very much affected by what globally are important complexities, climate change and migration. So besides looking at the locality and the site-specificness and the social political circumstances, Manifesta always looks on the main topics and try to face those issues. And this is the title of this presentation, From Signals to Substance. How can something as a Manifesta, don't worry that we don't need to call it a biennial, could be a museum, how can we really help in creating constructive, possible ideas, I don't even want to say solutions, but ideas to create a coexistence, to bring in some very concrete proposals to make, well, in the end, the world a better place, if you want. And this is what Leo Luco and myself, and of course a team of more than 100 people try to do. We started with OMA. I will go through it quite fast if this works. One of the things OMA identified that Palermo cannot be seen separately from an enormous system of flows, which is not only related to, let's say, the Middle East, Northern Africa, but also Western Europe and the Caucasus, but especially also to Marseille. So this is where you see the selection of a city is never monolithic or single focused. It's always in a relationship to have a thematic approach for a longer time. Part of the OMA research was not only on architecture and urbanistic issues, but also about how do people live together, what sort of coexistence is functioning. So we found out that in the garages and backside spaces of Palermo, many different religions were practiced, which were part of this kind of map of communities to understand where are we, what does it make for us to create a kind of coexistence in the city itself. And you see that besides the Ghanese, the Bangladeshi, the Tamil, and of course the Sicilians, there are many tourists, but the tourist part of the city was completely destroyed. By the way, almost nobody knows it. The city of Palermo, which was one of the most beautiful heritage cities in southern Mediterranean, was bombed by the Americans by the invasion in 1943, and in one night 1,500 palaces, cloisters were destroyed and never been built up. This is the part which OMA and Manifesta decided to look into and to select a certain amount of buildings, which together with the government we were refurbishing. So this is part of the legacy for afterward, but also to try to find out how all these buildings could be a symbol, a metaphor for the history and for the communities. You see the Orto Botanico, and this is where the title of Manifesta 12 comes from. The title is the book of the French botanist Gilles Clément, in which he describes that we need to work with the earth as a garden, a giardino. So what would happen if we all become gardeners, and what will happen if we take care of the globe, of the planet, at the same time as we take care of our garden? And this is why the main venue in Manifesta was the Orto Botanico and the industrial parts around it to create connections. Of course, also, as I said, most of the palazzi in Palermo were destroyed or neglected, or because the mafia took out most of the communities of the inner center. We tried also to see how we could create international cooperations to restore some of the most iconic buildings. And here you see Palazzo Constantino, which was one of the key palazzo. This is a part of the famous Orto Botanico. And why was it selected? And this makes maybe already clear why this overall thematic approach of migration and climate change in relation to the revitalization of the city of Palermo was so crucial. All the species, almost nobody knows this, but I like the detail very much, all the species, plants, trees in Sicily even the iconic lemon, which is like the brand of Sicily, come from outside. They migrated from all over the world to Sicily. And that was a wonderful metaphor for us to understand maybe migration can be seen from a different perspective. One of the projects we did with Gilles Clément, the French botanist, and Coloco, so all the participants, we don't speak about artists because many people are participants, botanists, architects, filmmakers, feminists. Most of the groups were matched with a local producer. So this is one of the, let's say, mafia-orientated areas where we started working. Also, this is part of the coastline which has been occupied by mafia. This is Ippolito Pestellini Laparello, who did for OMA the work. This was the Palermo Atlas, the book, which was given, let's say, the urban studies, which were given by Manifesta to the city council to have a vision on how Palermo could be developed in the future. I go a little bit more fast, otherwise.
I think that means that we have like 10, 15,
Exactly.
15 minutes left. Thank you.
Let me go a little bit more fast. Maybe this is interesting because everybody's always asking, okay, interesting what Manifesta does, but what is the legacy? What do you leave behind? I show this picture because this was our embassy for 2.5 years before opening the Biennale. So day by day, groups of local community came into the Teatro Garibaldi, an abandoned 19th century building. And after Manifesta, it became, let's say, a cultural center too. So not only from the perspective of the Biennale itself, the Biennale is only a part in a constant flow of activities which need to continue after the Biennale. And we guaranteed that there was like budget, and this is important in a practical sense, that there was budget available for the after, we call it the post-Manifesta, so local community can continue. We worked a lot with the migrants coming inside Palermo, and as you maybe know, the mayor of Palermo says to every migrant, "Io sono palermitano, anche tu." I am a palermitano, but also I welcome you as a palermitano. And this is Jalilia Tico, an African artist, who transformed a Christian ritual into an African syncretist, beautiful work. This is a 400 years old archive, which was never opened, and we opened it with Manifesta, with a work by a Sicilian group, and I completely agree with my colleagues. 70% of our audience are local and regional. This is also why I always estimate for our curators, we need to have involvement of local participants, but also co-creation means that every international person who comes needs to link himself with the local people. Local craftsmen, local association, local group. This is a social parade by Marinella Senatore, who organized, let's say, a parade of all the misfits in the city. People who are never on a stage, people who are never, let's say, disabled, blind people, people who are not celebrated as the builders. Many people could not come to Manifesta, especially children. So we said to the local bus organization, give us 2 buses for those people who cannot come to Manifesta. Manifesta comes to those people. So here you see us outside on the coastline with the Manifesta hub doing the education. And I'm super proud that our head of education is the Russian Yana Klitschuk, who does an amazing work, not on the moment of organizing guided tours, but really bottom-up, organizing local communities to make understand what culture can do. And I really think she should have the prize of European Cultural Person of the Year instead of me. So here you see the beautiful space of the Teatro Garibaldi, which is still functioning. This is this Zona Espansione Nord, which we transformed into a garden for young people, and you see how it looks now. And for the next 10 years, this is guaranteed. I will not speak a lot about Manifesta 13, which is very close to my colleague in Lyon. It's called Trait d'Union. Why? It's yellow. Yellow vest, we say sometimes. But also Trait d'Union is hyphen. It's a kind of creating a collaboration, creating connections, actually, and I think this is not only very needed in a period of polarization and social justice, but also especially in Manifesta 13. We again start with architecture. I don't know if we have a lot more. No. Shall I leave it with this?
Thank you, Hedwig. What Manifesta does is really amazing, and the bottom-up work that you're doing, and it is really, I think, setting up an impetus to other, let's not say biennials, but to other cultural projects. Just a quick question. So Manifesta is somehow based around European, it's based in Europe. Are you having any plans or ambitions in moving beyond that and in setting up editions?
No, definitely not. I was talking recently to a South African Dutch artist called Marlene Dumas, and she said, when you started Manifesta in 1993, we, OQMW, or many people much more involved in a global context, said, why do we have to focus on Europe? And what is Europe? And she said, I completely changed my mind 30 years later, because Europe in itself, and we take Europe as a very broad connotation. For me, Caucasus, Tbilisi is maybe Europe too. For me, St. Petersburg is Europe too. For me, maybe even Greenland is Europe too. Northern Africa is maybe. So Europe in its largest connotation is more relevant than ever. Because with the United States towards China, with the polarization in the world, there's so much still to research. And every 5 years, a group of international former curators, but also thinkers and philosophers, we discuss as a kind of European artistic parliament. We discuss what are the main topics which Manifesta could relate to. Because it's not about just art exhibitions. And one of the main topics is how do, for example, not only in Europe, but also outside, post-colonialism and post-communism, which is half of the part of European continent, and the other half of the part of the European continent was involved in colonial practices. How do these notions relate to each other, and what do they have to deal with each other, and how come nobody was researching? So we always identify an overall thematic approach and try to build up. For the edition, maybe just to know, for the edition Manifesta 14, we go to the Balkan, Pristina, Kosovo, youngest sovereign country in Europe. Well, we're going to shift. I decided to shift completely. We're not going to do exhibitions primarily, but we're going to build up a new intercultural, interdiscipline, inclusive institution, cultural institution for the 21st century, hopefully in satellite cities in the Balkan. So which maybe have the biennial period as just an opening period, but focusing on long-term sustainability, also to rethink what is the relevance of doing a series of exhibitions when Europe itself is in such actually deep complexity and needs maybe completely different solutions.
Thank you, Hedwig. So there is not much time left, and I would like to conclude our discussion today with maybe actually asking a question that I would like to have maybe 2 answers from Alisa and Hedwig, since you're more included into the realities of Russia. Hedwig did the Biennial here in 2014 in St. Petersburg. So as you know, well, St. Petersburg is an amazing city, but it is mostly perceived in the outside world and globally as a scene for retrospective and classical arts. We are very famous for the Hermitage and for the Russian museums. But is there really, like for us at Manege, it is really a very interesting point, is there really a need or a perspective for setting up, let's say, a biennial of our own, or a cultural project of our own that's going to happen recurrently, that will somehow set up the contemporary art scene in motion? So Hedwig, what is your take on this? What is your comment?
I think the question is not only for St. Petersburg, the question is almost raised in every country, in every city where Manifesta is landing for 4 to 6 years. And for me, the question is sort of irrelevant. I mean, there are 300 biennials in the world. The question is mostly, what is the urgency in St. Petersburg? What do you need? And if I would be in charge, which obviously I'm not, but if I would be in charge, I would sit together with all those people in the artistic scene and do, like maybe Manifesta does, a bottom-up democratic kind of consultation. And we do this right now in Marseille. Actually, we started yesterday. What does the city need in terms of infrastructure? Do you need a new institution in terms of art education? Do you need artists in residencies? Do you need a kind of intercultural institution linking to other cities? Do you need a Kunsthalle like the Manege? And maybe in the end, everybody comes up to the answer, no, we don't need a biennial because the rest of the infrastructure is not even existing. There's no, let's say, the art education or the artist in residence or the position of contemporary artists is not as such that we need to focus first and mainly on building up the infrastructure. Or the answer could be, listen, we don't need the infrastructure here, we only want to focus on cultural marketing of the city, and we use or misuse the biennial as a marketing instrument. That's what many city governments in the world do. But I think, in my humble and modest perception, it should come from the artistic scene itself. What do the artistic scene and the heritage of this scene is so huge. I mean, from the avant-garde, from the 100 years, literature, architecture, painting, Gesamtkunstwerk. I mean, there's so much heritage. You would imagine that for the artistic scene, building up an infrastructure is super important.
Thank you. Alisa?
Ну, я бы ответила сейчас по-русски. Мне кажется, что важно перефразировать, что насколько, опять-таки, не насколько Петербургу нужна биеннале, а насколько Петербургу нужен большой проект, чтобы как бы перезапустить вот это вот ощущение, дать это ощущение важной, насыщенной жизни именно вот современного искусства. Мне кажется, что кураторский форум, который сделали мои коллеги в ГЦСИ Петербурга, показал очень важный такой тренд о том, что насколько живая вот эта вот как бы неофициальная сцена Петербурга, вот эти artist run spaces, маленькие галереи, мастерские художников, вот как бы там такая жизнь невероятная, которая, вот раскидана везде, да, и мы ее как бы можем собрать только каким-то вот этим вот усилием организационным, да, когда, например, привозятся кураторы, и вот мы все ездили и открывали для себя вот эти там мастерские художников или небольшие галереи, и вот как бы было ощущение того, что Петербург просто захлебывается, да, в этой вот насыщенности художественной. Но когда нет кураторского форума, да, у нас нет такой, какого-то вот этого ощущения того, что город живет современным искусством. Я думаю, что я соглашусь с Hedwig о том, что необходима некая процедура вот такого, знаете, саморефлексии в Петербурге о том, в общем, ну, какая потребность назрела. И с одной стороны здесь все перенасыщено культурой, да, а с другой стороны, возможно, именно сейчас такой правильный момент для того, чтобы Петербургу задуматься именно о каком-то таком связующем проекте. Я немножко опасаюсь за слово «биеннале», потому что, знаете, как бы самый ужас всегда в том, что когда ты сделаешь одну биеннале, ты понимаешь, боже мой, надо делать вторую и третью и так далее. И вот это огромная ответственность, которую, знаете, нам так кажется классно, биеннале, вот какие эффекты. Но мне кажется, что, ну, как бы 3 раза подумай, а потом биенналь. Вот, наверное, такой ответ.
Спасибо. Thank you so much. So I would like to thank again all of the speakers. Alisa Prudnikova, Isabel Bertolotti, Nawar Qassimi, Hedwig Fane. And thank you very much for the Cultural Forum and to the wonderful team of the Manege who helped organize this, this event. Just to conclude, it takes just several seconds. Well, I guess biennials actually are becoming, in a way, alternatives to museum or gallery spaces because they are able to react more rapidly to current events or trends, if I might say. And if we are talking about St. Petersburg, it is, as Alisa mentioned, probably in need of a cultural project that is able to network everything's going on in the field of contemporary. So let's see where it leads us. Thank you. Всем большое спасибо.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, спасибо большое. На этом дискуссия подошла к концу. Мы просим вас покинуть главную трибуну, не забыть вернуть оборудование для синхронного перевода в кассы. Я напоминаю вам, что выход осуществляется через цокольный этаж. Спасибо, что были нашими слушателями. Следующий слух программы начнется в 14 часов 30 минут.